Hi you! I will pick up after that girl from part 1 and continue installing Arch with you. I think she just about finished partitioning the virtual machine disk and formatting one partition as EFI boot and the other as ext4. And she's told you to use the wiki, right? That's real important, so let's start there. Just a quick note first. We're about to dive in a bit deeper now, and it's important to understand that the Arch wiki is dynamic and can change, so you must actually read it. Do not disconnect your brain and blindly do what some stupid video tells you, this one included. You will for certain come across special cases and uncommon problems, and chances are the wiki will be able to help you, but only if you actually read it. Here's the wiki, starting from where that girl left off. Now, the thing is, the ext4 partition will be our root file system, and the EFI partition will hold the UEFI stuff that we need to boot. Remember that we have booted a virtual machine with the Arch ISO we downloaded? So we're currently running the Arch Linux that is installed in the ISO file. In order to install Arch onto those virtual machine disk partitions, we need to mount them into the Arch we are currently running. That's what the wiki is explaining here. The wiki suggests we mount the root partition onto the mount folder. This means the root of the new VM file system will reside under mount in our currently booted Arch. And then, we'll create a boot folder under that new root and mount the EFI boot partition there. So, we'll have the virtual machine's root under mount and its boot folder will be under mount boot, and then we will be ready to copy in the files we need. This is what that looks like in our VM. Next, we'll put some stuff in there. Basically, that stuff is Arch Linux, and the way to put it there is to install it. Which is what the wiki brings up next. And the first step is to decide where that Arch Linux should come from. It may be natural to think that we'd copy it from the ISO we've already downloaded, but that's not it. That ISO may be many days old, and Arch is a rolling release, which means it receives updates continuously, like several times a day. So when we install Arch, we'll do it directly from the mirrors. The mirrors are spread around the globe and are more or less continuously updated. Which, when you think about it, means that some may be far away and provide lower download speed, and some may be lagging a little behind the latest updates. Therefore, you can select which mirrors to use. For the installation right now, it's not all that important because the current mirror list is good, but we will look into it a little bit because the mirror list is used every time you update, and it's useful to know how it works. The wiki points to more reading material regarding mirrors, and if you have a look, you will find the mirror status page. In that page you can see mirrors that have successfully synced, where they are located, and what the URL is. That information you can use to edit the mirror list, which is located in etcpacman.dmirrorlist and looks like this in our VM. You can edit it to make a good mirror list, but what is good this week may not be all that good next week, and that's a little awkward, so Arch has a smart little utility to keep the mirror list updated with good mirrors. That utility is called Reflector, and it has actually been run already, which is why the current mirror list is in fact good. So, let us just continue, and get back to Reflector later. We are now ready to install Arch. Take note of that note, by the way. The Arch that we are running now, from the ISO file, has lots of tools installed that are not part of the essential packages we are about to install. This is explained just below, and it's worth paying attention because you may need some extra package to support your hardware, so do check it out. Now, I like the Nano text editor and I like Network Manager for networking, so I will add those packages to the install. You can pick and choose what you like best for your own install. I recommend checking out the searchable list of packages that can be found in the top menu on the Arch web pages. But don't add a truckload of stuff now, it's better to take it one step at a time. Alright, it's time to get rolling. I'll bring up the VM now, and we'll run the packstrap command to install the packages we specified. First, information on what packages exist on the current mirror is downloaded. That is called syncing. Then the packages we specified, and its dependencies, will be downloaded and installed. It's going to take a little time, so I sped up the boring parts a bit. But it's still about a couple of minutes long, so please skip ahead if you're in a hurry. Later, when you will be upgrading Arch, you will use the pacman command. It will take two parameters, Y to sync and U to upgrade. Pacman will keep track of what packages it has already downloaded, and during syncing it will compare that with the packages that exist on the mirror and only download packages that are newer. I mention it because some people make a mistake when they upgrade. You can force pacman to sync to all package versions on a mirror by specifying the parameter Y twice. It has a purpose if the local pacman database gets corrupted, but otherwise you just risk that pacman will update its database with older packages than what it already has installed, which can cause trouble because you get a mix of old and new packages. It's called a partial upgrade, and it's bad, so don't do that mistake. Normal upgrades should always be done with one Y and one U. You'll see it in practice soon, when we upgrade our newly installed Arch. I think the installation is about to finish now. That last bit is about creating the Initram FS, which is used during early booting to be able to load the rest of the OS. It complains a lot about firmware that may be missing, but that's most likely just noise, because the main reason you don't have the firmware is that you don't have the device in the first place. Still, as always, it's good to take notice. Now that the installation is finished, there's a little bit of preparation to do, and then we'll enter into it. So let's put away the VM for now, and have a look at the wiki again. We have now finished installing Arch into the root file system we mounted onto mount. The next step would be to boot into it, but it will work better if we do a little bit of configuration first. We start by generating the fstab file so that the partitions we have prepared gets mounted when we boot. After it's generated, we should check that it ended up good, so this is what it looks like in our VM. We can compare it to the output of lsblk. I cry when I see the ugly formatting of fstab, otherwise that looks good. Next, we'll enter into the new install without actually booting it. It's called cherooting, and it's kind of cool. You enter into the OS by changing the root of your current process to that of the OS you're cherooting into, so you can use its utilities and modify its files. By the way, this is also a great way to fix an OS that can't otherwise boot, or if you have lost the root password or something like that. The reason we do it now is so we can fix a few things before we boot. We will set the correct time zone and initialize the time adjustment settings. Note that this does not set up time synchronization. We will also enable the system locales we want to use. The output so far, including the first lines of etc locale.gen, looks like this. All lines in the locale.gen file are commented out, so you uncomment the locales you need, and then you run the command locale-gen to create the actual locales. When the locales have been generated, you can select the one you want to use by default by editing the file etc locale.conf and setting the lang variable. There are more variables that can be set, and you can mix and match. I use English as a language, but Norwegian settings for most other things, like date and time formats. The last bit of the locale configuration is to save the keymap configuration. You simply enter the name of the keyboard configuration you selected earlier into the file etc vconsole.conf. Now, we're almost done. The network configuration needs to be in place, and apart from setting the host name, there's a lot of info on that topic if you find that you need to dive in. However, if you installed Network Manager, you're most likely going to be good, because you can connect to the network after you've booted. Because of this, Network Manager may be a good choice to start out with. The wiki also shares a bit of info on Initram FS here. Do you remember we talked about it at the end of the installation? That should be okay now, so this bit is just if you're doing something fancy, like what it says in the text there. Then we're going to set the root password. That's an easy one. And finally, we have to install a bootloader. There's a lot to read and learn about Arch booting, and you should do so. A good start is right here, learning about the different bootloaders and the microcode updates. But if you're like me, you're probably eager to get that new install booted, so let's try to make this quick and easy. Here's the deal. If you promise to read up on bootloaders, I'll recommend that you just go with Grub for now. And because Grub is fairly smart, you'll get away with that microcode bit by simply installing AMD Ucode if you have an AMD processor or Intel Ucode if you have an Intel processor. And if you're installing to a VM, like me, you don't need to install any microcode update at all. Grub has its own wiki page, and it's a lot of info there, so if you're going with Grub, I really recommend you read through it. Depending on whether you're booting with UEFI or BIOS, there are 2 different ways to install Grub, and then it must be configured. Luckily, both are fairly straightforward. I'm installing with UEFI, so I'll do that, but doing it with BIOS is pretty much the same thing, even simpler, so if that's your situation, you check that out. Here's the output from installing the Grub and EFI boot manager packages. After the packages are installed, Grub has to be installed onto the boot partition and configured. So, here's the output of that too. Basically, we have installed Grub and then written it to the boot partition and then configured it so it finds the Linux we have installed. Okay? Let boot now. I'll bring up the VM again. First, we'll exit the chroot and then we'll reboot. Okay, it's booting now. It will terminate all its processes and then bring up Grub when it boots. I'll let Grub time out so you can see it, and then it will continue booting, starting all its stuff. And then I'll log in. Currently we have only the root user, so I'll log in as that. Phew, I think that went fairly well. The VM booted, and I logged in as root. Now, you have a live and kicking Arch install. Ready to roll! The really cool thing is that there's nothing more installed than the things you have specifically requested. It's your Arch now. Okay, now there are a few things to get right before I can let you loose. First, you need to get online. To do that, you need to first start the Network Manager service, assuming you installed Network Manager, of course. Network Manager has a fairly easy-to-use text-based interface named NM2A that you can use to select and connect to both fixed and Wi-Fi networks. And while we're on the topic of starting services, you should also start Reflector. And check the configuration. What you see is from the Reflector wiki page. It's really easy. Now, you may have noticed the installation guide had a link at the bottom to this page. The general recommendations. That's a really good page, and it will help you with many things, not least creating normal users, which is very important. You really should avoid using root. That reminds me. I think that girl in part 1 promised a few tips on managing Arch. You'll find them in the wiki, so the number 1 tip must be to use the wiki. Then, please remember what I said about using Pacman to upgrade. And learn to use the AUR properly. Helper applications may make things easier, but they also hide things from you and keeps you from learning. You get the drift? Want a good graphical desktop? Use the wiki and have fun!